preview Miami's 2025 season. Let's get into it. Carson Beck takes over as starting quarterback, transfers down from Georgia after coming off a season-ending injury. Now Miami's paying him a pretty good amount of money to come down and become their starting quarterback. Matt, let me ask you, how do you feel about Carson Beck going into 2025 as Miami's starting quarterback?
I'm a numbers guy. I'm a truth guy, so to speak. A lot of Georgia people were happy to see him go, and good riddance, led the SEC with 12 interceptions. But when you sort of look inside the numbers, right, a year ago, he was the Heisman Trophy front runner at this time, coming off a great season at Georgia. Obviously, had a couple of, Bowers, McConkey had a lot to do with that. Good running game had a lot to do with that. A decent offensive line had a lot to do with that. Last year, you don't have McConkey. You don't have Bowers. You don't have a good offensive line. You don't have a good running game.
Right.
And his receiving core dropped the most yards of passes in Power 4. So you add it all up, and you can sort of say, well, it wasn't all on Carson Beck. And if at Miami he has the running game, he has the offensive line, I know he has that. But I'm not sure he has it the receivers, right? So if he has the receivers, he's going to be just fine. He'll look pretty similar to how he did, my guess is, a couple of years ago and be excellent. And if he doesn't have the receivers, then it's on Shannon Dawson to earn his money. I think he's making less than Carson Beck, quite a bit less than Carson Beck. But it'll be on him to make his money and figure out ways to get the ball to players in space. Maybe he's got to play a young guy like a Malachi Toney, or just figure it out. There's definitely enough talent on this team to make Carson Beck great.
Definitely. And you brought up my next point, Malachi Toney. Obviously, can't wait to see him for the Canes this season. What are your thoughts on his role and what it'll be for Miami and kind of a lighter, obviously, like you just mentioned, lighter wide receiving room, so to speak, for the Canes? How do you feel about Toney's role this season?
Well, you can tell I'm a young man, but I did cover Roscoe Parrish when he was here, and I haven't seen a guy as jittery, as quick as Toney since Roscoe, quite honestly.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, you watch him in practice, and not only is he that fast and sort of really difficult to track down in space, but he has that Miami swag, right? He's from the area. He's not scared going against older players. As a matter of fact, I saw him get in older players' faces after he made catches on them in spring practice. So this is the kind of guy I think that coaches can trust on the field. A lot of times they don't want to put a true freshman out there, which is why you get a Tony Johnson, which is why you got a Keelan Marriott in the transfer portal, right? Guys that can play in the slot. You have Ray Joseph come back, who hasn't done much and bulked up a little too much, honestly, to be as quick as I think he should be, or as fast as he should be. But I think Toney is, along with Jojo Trader, those are the two most talented, physically talented guys in the receiver room. I don't know how you don't play both those guys a ton. I think Trader will start after playing not that much last year, other than the bowl game. And then I do think Toney will have a big role. But I do think Miami coaches value that experience, and I think that that could hold back some of his reps that'll go to the older guys.
I don't think there's any problem with that. As a young guy coming up in college football, he's got a lot to learn. He's got to learn the playbook. The game itself is a lot faster, obviously. So I have no problem with the coaches maybe holding back on Toney's minutes, but I can't wait to see him for the Canes. Obviously an electric player, like you just mentioned. Let's go over to the running game and the running backs. Obviously, Mark Fletcher is going to lead the room here. You guys got the North Dakota State transfer, Shamar Brown, as well. Matt, how do you feel about Miami's run game going into 2025? One thing I will know, I feel like Damian Martinez was a big part in Cam Ward's success, taking a lot of pressure off of Cam Ward, having that safety valve in the run game. How do you feel about Miami's run game going into 2025?
Well, people forget Damian Martinez was essentially benched at one point. It was the early middle part of the season because he wasn't that effective, and they came back and ran with a new purpose. But Mark Fletcher is a guy who 2 years ago showed he can be really, really effective. This past season, he still was really good, but remember, he wasn't even supposed to really be playing that much, coming off a major foot injury from the prior bowl game. He just recovered really fast and looked fine. And Jordan Lyle, to me, Jordan Lyle's the most explosive running back in the room, right? Mark Fletcher's got the power aspect, but Jordan Lyle's got enough power and he's got the speed. And we saw it last year. And I'm excited to see Jordan this fall. I'm hoping, there's a tendency among coaches to really bulk up running backs because the injuries just happen like crazy to running backs. It's actually probably the most injury-prone room. I mean, you think about it, right? The pounding those guys take is insane, which is why it's great they got Shamar Brown, because now they have three guys and all of them have power elements, but Shamar Brown really has a power element. But I think Jordan Lyle is the most talented back, But I think Mark Fletcher is going to be the most consistent back. And I think this running backs room is going to be just as good as last year, despite losing Damian Martinez, if not better. Because the offensive line is going to be, in my opinion, better. You lose Jalen Rivers, but Markel Bell looked great and taking over for Jalen. And you have Ryan Rodriguez back, who can help out at either guard spot, maybe even start over McCoy at right guard. At left guard. And then on top of that, you have an upgraded center because James Brockermeyer is better than Zach Carpenter was. So you get these guys running behind those guys. You got Carson Beck, who's a really good game manager and obviously a big-time playmaker. I mean, these guys should be running for plenty of yards, especially with Mario. He wants to just pound teams into the ground, and these guys will get a lot of opportunities.
Absolutely, and can't go without mentioning Big Francis, potentially could be a top 10 pick in next year's draft. He plays his cards right. What are your thoughts on his potential going into the season?
Yeah, Mawanoa is a star. I think Pro Football Focus ranked him the second offensive lineman in the country, and with good reason. There's nobody he can't block, right? He gave up, I think, 1 sack and 500 reps last year, and I think and maybe a few quarterback pressure. Like there's just nothing that you can say about Francis that isn't just over the top. Like just pick out the greatest adjectives in human history and put them in front of his name, and that's all you got to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said, Matt. Let's go over to the defense. How are you feeling about the Canes defense going into 2025? Obviously, that defensive line got several names on that defensive line. I can't wait to see, including Ruben Bain moving back in that secondary. The secondary looks to be revamped going into this season. But how do you feel about the Canes defense going into 2025?
Last year was a disaster. People wanted to blame Lance Guidry, but in reality, it was a combination of factors. Lance Guidry's defense is predicated on strong cornerback play. He didn't know how to run a defense that could sort of protect the cornerbacks because he's an attacking. That's his mindset: is attack, make the quarterback uncomfortable. Don't let him sit back there and hold the ball and find guys down the field, which is fine. No. Except for the fact that the Miami personnel at cornerback and safety was bad. It was bad last year, and there was injury problems that contributed to that. But now this year they really, and credit to Mario Cristobal, they really attacked cornerback and to a lesser extent safety in the portal to make sure those positions are shored up for a new defense coordinator who runs an attacking 4-2-5.
Yep.
Obviously, there's differences in their schemes. For instance, Lance Guidry, which I always called him out for. I don't love defensive ends covering slot receivers, and there was teams last year that were able to get that matchup, which should never happen. There was a lot of confusion last year in the back end. You'd see players holding their hands up, looking to the sidelines, literally at the snap. Those things are unacceptable. And Corey Heatherman brings in sort of a simpler style of defense, one that's easier to understand, one that will not let teams create these matchups at will that are just awful, which is great. But he does have the similar 4-2-5 concepts of attacking, putting linebackers, in the box and attacking the offensive backfield and leaving corners one-on-one down the field. That has to happen in his defense for his defense to be successful. So the good news is guys like Xavier Lucas, even Ethan O'Connor that came in, those two corners are great. They got a guy, Keontae Scott, who they're moving back to nickel, who was terrible last year at outside, but 2 years ago was really good with the current Miami defensive backs coach at Houston, and he's now back at nickel. He'll be I think, really good. So there's more than enough at corner. My concerns on defense are safety, where they added Zechariah Poyser, who looked great this spring, but Jacksonville State, 1-year starter there after redshirting there. So I'm not quite sold there yet, but I like what I saw from him. And then probably Jacoby Thomas, who couldn't earn a starting job at Tennessee last year, wasn't going to get a starting job this year. He's probably going to start here, which, you don't love that background, but maybe he'll be good enough. I got to lay eyes on him this fall before I make a definitive yes or no on my thought on him. But Miami was desperate at safety. There just wasn't a lot of talent out there to grab. And then the linebacker core, they're hoping Mohamed Toure from Rutgers can be an answer. Supposedly he looks good. He'll be back, I think, at some point this fall off his torn ACL, and they're hoping he'll be back to the 92 sacks he had 2 years ago at Rutgers when Heatherman was his linebackers coach. And then defensive tackle, that's a major question mark. They brought in David Blay from a lower level program. He didn't do much this spring. They got Justin Scott, who was a former 5-star. They're hoping he can be really good, but he barely played last year as a true freshman. And they have Ahmad Moten, who's been mainly a backup, a couple of starts here and there, and he's just been okay. So the end position's stacked. End position is loaded. They'll get plenty of pressure on the quarterback from the end positions. But that up the middle, if you can't stop that run with those tackles, you got to bring the linebackers down and help out with that. And the safeties are questionable. I mean, that's going to be the concern. And that answer will come in game one, because Notre Dame is going to come in just trying to exploit that and see if there's a problem there. And if there's not, then I think Miami will have a really good chance of winning that game, even though they're underdogs in the early game.
No doubt. I can't wait to see it. Matt, my next question for you is, in terms of transfers coming in, and I'm talking transfers more than high school recruits, and let's exclude Carson Beck out of this because that's probably the obvious answer, but which transfer coming into Miami you think will have the biggest impact on the field this season? You got Shamar Brown, you got Xavier Lucas, who you mentioned. Which transfer do you think will have the biggest impact on the field for the Canes this season?
Yeah, well, I think certainly Xavier Lucas, with probably tied for second, Zechariah Poyser and Keelan Marion, because I think Marion can be a really explosive kick returner, which Miami has not had one of those since Devin Hester, maybe? I mean, that's a long time ago. They probably have had others since then, but he's the one who stands out, right? Mm-hmm. So if they can, people don't put their eye on special teams that much, but Shamar Brown might return kicks, Keelan Marion returning punts, rather, not kicks, but punts and kicks, whatever. Yeah. But those guys, if there's explosive ability in the return game, those are hitting yards, those are hidden points that can turn a game that winds up being a close game. So I think those three guys, just off the top of my head, I think will probably be the biggest difference maker. And then again, if the Rutgers middle linebacker, if he comes through, I mean, that's a home run. If he's as good as he was 2 years ago, he's a monster.
Yeah, absolutely. He's reunited with his coach as well. So if he steps up and plays, I mean, that's going to be a pretty good thing for the Canes. Let's go into recruiting, high school recruiting here. I had Steve Kim, who's a Miami alumni, on the show to break this down. You guys landed Jackson Cantwell, number one tackle class of 2026, and he made headlines in choosing the Canes over Georgia. Came out and called out Pete Nakos and On3 and everybody else over this. What are your thoughts on this commitment for Miami? I think this is a massive pickup for Miami going forward. Big get for Mario Cristobal and the offensive line coach down there as well. What does this mean? This commitment mean for the University of Miami?
What does it mean for Mario? Because this is what Mario loves to do. He got other 5 stars on the offensive line, right? With Francis Mauanoa, Samson Okunlola. Like, he loves offensive linemen. He would probably get a second mortgage on his house. It's not paid off. If it's paid off, a first mortgage,
right?
To get a guy like this. I mean, these are the guys he personally. Most coaches don't do this. He personally coaches the offensive lineman every single practice. He's right next to Alex Mirabal. You can't really see because he's 5 foot tall, but he's right next to Alex Mirabal every single practice with the offensive line group. This is not a head coach who's wandering constantly throughout the practice from group to group. He's spending a lot of his time with the offensive line because he recognizes that if you have a great offensive line, that really can dictate A, the tempo of a game, B, the time of possession of a game, and C, how your offense can score points. Because if you can control the ball and score points on offense, that helps your defense rest. That helps give your defensive coaches time to scheme up. Hey, what are they doing to us? What can we do to fix it? It fixes a lot of problems. And kudos to him for getting the guys you need on board to be good, right? The Miami offensive line, if you look at any publication or ranking, they're in the top 10 in the nation for best offensive line rooms. And Mario Cristobal making it a priority and getting guys like this and paying the money that he has to and forming the bonds he needs to are the reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And you already brought up and you mentioned Alex Mirabal. He's been with Cristobal since his Oregon days. I got a chance to meet him when I was in high school. He was working out a buddy of mine, recruiting him back in the day. I think he's one of the best offensive line coaches in college football, along with Coach Cap over at Alabama, Bill Beatonball in Oklahoma. Discuss Coach Mirabal's impact, I guess, on Mario Cristobal going back to the Oregon days, and then Mirabal's impact on Miami's offensive line.
Yeah, Mirabal's great. He actually began. He was a teacher, I think, at Columbus, and a football coach at Columbus. And there's a great story about he gets so pumped up. And he cares. He's not one of these coaches who, goes home and, yeah, we lost today. Oh, well, and eats his dinner and has a good night watching TV. Like, he wants to do right for his players. He takes his stuff to heart. And when he was coaching, maybe it was in the JV. I don't know. I wrote about this a long time ago, but he was coaching this team at Columbus. Mm-hmm. And he got so animated that he threw his arms up in the air at one point, and his hand went through a window, and he had to go by ambulance to the emergency room in the middle of a game. But he wears his heart on his sleeve, and he'll tell guys, he'll get in their faces And it's kind of funny when he does, right? Because you got a 6'9" Markel Bell who weighs 335 pounds, right? And you got a 5'0", 130-pound guy screaming at him, looking up at him. It's kind of funny to see, but these players listen to him like these are God's words. He knows offensive line technique. He knows what creates a great offensive line. He knows what a great offensive lineman looks like nobody else in the country. And that's why Mario Cristobal has never let Alex Mirabal go. If Alex Mirabal tried to leave, Mario Cristobal would have him cryo-frozen and keep his brain available to speak to the players. There's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well said, Matt. And don't get it twisted. It don't matter how big the offensive linemen are. Coach Mirabal going to get after him. He's always done that. He's been fiery, been that guy, just like you mentioned. So, man, great perspective, Matt, on Coach Mirabal. Let me ask you, final question for you. I can't thank you enough for joining my show here on this fine Thursday. Your expectations for Miami going into 2025, they're in a pretty, in my opinion, wide open conference with the possible exception of Clemson. Clemson's probably the front dogs. You got you guys, Bill Belichick and the Tar Heels. Who knows what they'll look like? Several other teams as well in the ACC. But what are your expectations for Miami going into 2025? Are they a playoff team? Is it playoff or bust for the Canes?
Well, I mean, I've been accused of being very negative by Miami fans because I try to tell the truth and not just – it's easy to say 12-0, right? And the Miami fans are like, oh, my gosh, we love you so much. Oh, I agree with you, right? Because Miami fans think they're going to win every game every single year. That's just how they are. That's how every fan is in the country. It's the preseason. Everything's great.
Yeah.
But in reality, I think the best case scenario, in my mind, realistically, is they split with Notre Dame in Florida, and then they lose one ACC game and wind up 10-2, which will be good enough to get in the playoffs. Okay.
Right. Yep.
I think that's what will happen. But if you slip up, for instance, I was looking at some of these other teams. Pittsburgh is being extremely undervalued. Pittsburgh has a really good quarterback, an amazing all-purpose running back, catches the ball like crazy.
Yep.
And one of the best linebacker corps in the country, and probably the best or one of the two best in the ACC. And nobody is giving them any respect. And that's a game in the season finale on the road, the end of November in Pittsburgh. A week after they're going to Virginia Tech and playing in Blacksburg in the cold weather. These teams get tired, man. And you got two back-to-back road games at the end of a long, grinding season. And we saw what happened against Syracuse last year, right? Mm-hmm. That scares me, right? But I would say 10 wins. I would say 10 wins is probably the bar. And I think 9 wins is more likely than 11, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. And let me ask you: do you look at Clemson as the top dog in the ACC, or who do you look at the ACC compared to Miami, and you compare them to basically?
Well, I'd be crazy not to say Clemson's the top team in the ACC, but you look at as we were sitting here a year ago, and by the way, a year ago I was saying Florida State was not going to be as good as people said, but I wasn't saying that they'd win 2 games, so everybody was wrong, including me. But I was saying this is not a top 10, top 20 team, because they were being ranked so highly last season, but they lost everybody, right? That's what you need to look at a lot of times. It's not just that, the name of the team and what they did the year before. It's what did they lose? And that's why Notre Dame is so dangerous. They have so much back other than a quarterback. So if that quarterback question is answered, that team's going to the national title game again, and we got them in game 1. And we got 10 transfer starters trying to play together and figure things out in game 1, whereas they've got a lot of pieces back on defense in particular.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's another story. But yeah, I would put Clemson far and away on paper the top team in the ACC because they're returning everybody. And this is why, and I don't want to get too long-winded, but people who have watched me on other podcasts or read my stories on Cane Sport, whatever, I'm not a guy who's a fan of taking 20 transfers. I'm not a guy who's a fan of taking 10 transfers. Okay, and Mario did take 20. And the reason is what you see happening with Clemson and what you see that happened to Florida State. When you take a ton of transfers every single year, and Miami is starting 10 transfers this year. That's the truth. Look at our depth chart. It's going to be 10 transfers that are starting this year that are new transfers. When you do that, you don't necessarily know what you have. You might be great, right? Florida State took a ton of transfers and went 12-0 during the regular season 2 years ago. Yeah. Then Florida State took a ton of transfers the next year and won 2 games.
Horrible.
It can go either way. But Clemson does not take transfers. They take fewer transfers than anybody. The average transfer number for the top 5 teams in the country, I figured it out, is 6 per year over the last 3 years. That's the golden number because you need to get top guys, which I call free agents, that have done really well at top programs, spend the money on those 5 or 6 guys. Mm-hmm. And the rest of your guys should be coming back and should be better than the year before. And that's, to me, the magic formula, not bringing in 20 guys and starting 10. Now, it might work this year. I think it will work this year for Miami. But to rely on that year after year isn't great. And I think after this year, the way Mario's building the roster, they can take a lot less transfers because they should have these young guys that he's recruited are so good. And I'm hoping they get some opportunities to shine this year and then be even better in 2026 when I think Miami can compete for a national title. I think this year playoffs, I think next year national title competition, competing for the national title realistically. I think that's Matt Chodell's, I don't know what you call them, magic words.
Hey, that's well said. And so you said national championship for the Canes in 2026.
Competing for national. I'm not saying they win it. I'm saying they realistically can compete for it. Yeah.
Who is your guy? Who are you promoting as quarterback? Do you like the young kid?
They're going to have to. They're going to have to either. Well, they're going to have to either. It's either going to be probably Luke Nickel, or I can't imagine Darian Coleman in year one, or a transfer. Right? I mean, imagine if they had Cam Ward on a team with a decent defense. That's a national title competing program.
Yeah.
So I think next year the defense will be even better than it'll be this year. The defense this year will be better than last year, but it's not going to be a top 15 defense in the country. It might be top 30, top 25. That would be good enough. Right. But I think looking a year from now, they can make it that. And then if you have, a really good quarterback, they should have some really good receivers that are young guys coming back, Trader, Tony. I mean, you name it. There's a bunch of guys. Elijah Lawson will be in year 3. He's going to be a star. Watch for that. Then the only thing you got to fix is the offensive line because they're going to lose their whole starting offensive line. So that'll be the key. But they have so many young guys like that. The plan's already there to have these younger offensive linemen be the starters next year. But that'll be in 2026 the question mark. If that offensive line comes through in 2026, I don't see why they can't be a top 5, top 4 team by the end of the year.